I wasn't even supposed to be home that night. That's the thought that gnaws at me, the loop that won't stop replaying whenever I close my eyes. If things had gone according to plan, I'd have been up north with Maya and the rest of the girls, in that shabby little rental cabin we'd booked, drinking boxed wine on the deck, laughing too loud, arguing about which slasher movie had the best final girl. That's where I was supposed to be. Safe, distracted, surrounded. Instead, I was sprawled alone across the couch in my second-floor apartment, the glow of some half-forgotten Netflix series flickering across the walls, a bowl of cold popcorn sitting untouched by my leg. It was just after midnight when it started. Not a knock. Pounding. The kind that makes the air in your lungs lock tight, that makes every muscle brace before you even register the sound. At first, I thought maybe it was my upstairs neighbors. They had a habit of stomping around like Clydesdales, usually drunk and yelling about poker or politics, sometimes both. But this wasn't from above. This was from my front door. The pounding came again, sharper this time. 3 hits, deliberate, heavy. Then a pause that felt too long, too still. Before I could even exhale, more followed, faster, erratic, like whoever was on the other side wasn't just trying to get in but to break through. I muted the TV. Suddenly the silence was unbearable, pressing in from every side. I could hear everything, my own shaky breathing, the hum of the fridge, the faint rattle of pipes in the wall. And beneath it all, the pounding. I live alone. A second-floor unit in a nothing special building on the sleepy edge of South Crestfield, just outside Chicago. I moved here after the break-in scare last year. My first apartment had thin windows that rattled like teeth in the wind, and one night I'd woken to the sound of someone trying the lock. Just the memory made my chest ache. This place was supposed to be safer, quieter. Nothing ever happens in South Crestfield. That was the point. But that night, everything felt wrong. I slipped off the couch and moved on bare feet toward the bedroom. My fingers closed around the handle of the old wooden bat under the bed, the same one from my Little League days, heavy in my palm, chipped near the top where it had once cracked against a ball. I'd started keeping it close after that junkie tried prying at the back window months ago. Back then, I told myself it was paranoia. But paranoia suddenly felt like the only thing keeping me alive. I crept back toward the front door, bat tight in my hand, and leaned into the peephole. It was Chloe. She lived a couple doors down. We weren't friends, just neighbors. The occasional nod at the mailbox, a muttered complaint about the laundry machine's eating quarters. She was always quiet, polite, reserved. But now she looked like she'd crawled out of hell. Blood streaked one side of her face. Her lip was split, swelling grotesquely. Her eyes were wide, glassy, flicking over her shoulder like she expected someone to appear out of the shadows and drag her away. I hesitated, just for a beat. Then I popped the deadbolt. She shoved past me the second the door cracked open, slamming it shut behind her so hard the walls trembled. Her chest heaved. Her voice was jagged. "Please," she gasped. "You've got to get me out of here. My boyfriend, he's trying to kill me." The bat hung limp in my hand. My mouth opened, but nothing came out except a stammer. "Wait, what? Chloe! There's no time," she snapped, cutting me off. Her voice cracked like it was splintering her throat. "If you help me, he'll kill you too, I swear to God." Her words hit like stone. She looked wrecked, terrified, trembling, her shirt torn at the shoulder, breath coming in shallow, broken bursts. I didn't think. I just reacted. I grabbed my keys off the wall hook, my phone and wallet shoved into my pockets. She was already clutching my arm, pulling me toward the door like gravity itself was dragging us. We bolted down the stairs. Her fingers dug into my sleeve, knotted so hard the fabric burned against my skin. Every few steps she looked back over her shoulder, her eyes darting to shadows that weren't there. I could barely keep my breath steady, my pulse banging against my ribs. I don't even remember getting into the car. Just the tremble in my hands as I fumbled the keys, Chloe half shoving me into the driver's seat. I reversed out of the lot too fast, tires squealing against asphalt, not even checking for traffic. "Where do you want me to take you?" I asked as the main road swallowed us whole. "Do you have family nearby? Friends? The cops?" She shook her head, her teeth catching her lip. "No, just a motel, somewhere. Please, I can call the police from there." Her voice cracked raw, the sound of someone running on fumes, on adrenaline and pure animal fear. I didn't press. I just drove. A few minutes later, the headlights carved out the crooked shape of a 24-hour roadside motel just past the town line. One flickering neon sign, paint peeling in curling strips, a crooked satellite dish listing like a broken limb on the roof. It looked like the kind of place you see in crime documentaries, but it was open, and it was there. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass gave us both a long, measuring look. His eyes lingered on the blood streaking Chloe's face. I leaned in close, lowering my voice. Her boyfriend beat her. The man's expression changed in an instant. He slid a key across the counter without another word. Room 214. Chloe's hand trembled as she took it. "Thank you." Barely audible. Then to me, "Can you get me some ice, please?" I nodded. My body moved before my brain could. I jogged toward the vending area, heart hammering, trying to process what the hell had just happened. When I came back, she was perched on the bed, a plastic bag of ice pressed to her swollen lip, phone in her other hand. She didn't look at me. "They're sending someone," she whispered. Then her voice broke into a half sob. Her shoulders folded, shaking as deep, shuddering cries ripped through her. I sat on the edge of the second bed, clumsy, unsure. I told her she was safe now, that I'd stay until the cops got there. She nodded faintly, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her bloody shirt. "He's always been like this," she murmured. "But tonight, I tried to leave. He came home. He saw me packing. He lost it." It made sense. Too much sense. The pounding on my door, her panic, the blood. But then time started to stretch. Minutes bled into an hour. No sirens, no flashing lights. The room faced the lot. You'd see them coming. I checked my phone. Nothing. "Chloe," I said carefully. Maybe call again, just to check?" She shrugged. "They're probably busy." Her voice was flat, detached, like it didn't matter anymore. Something shifted in me. My gut, that whisper you don't want to hear but can't ignore, started buzzing. She wasn't jumpy anymore. She wasn't watching the blinds. She wasn't acting like prey. She was calm. And then I saw the blood again. Really saw it. Her shirt wasn't dotted. It was soaked. Dark patches spreading across the fabric like water on paper. Too much for a busted lip. Too much for a cut. I forced my voice light. "Do you have other injuries? Like your stomach or side?" She didn't blink. "No, just my face." A lie. Cold shot through me, locking my chest. My fingers twitched toward my phone. "I think I'm going to call the cops again," I said, easing it out of my pocket. She stood. "Don't." Something metallic glinted in her hand. A knife. My breath stopped. The world tilted. "Put the phone down," she said softly. And I did. What followed, the slow unraveling of truth, the things she asked of me, the way the night warped into something I still can't explain, dragged me into a place where I don't know if I was running from a woman or from something much older, much darker, wearing her face. Because later, when the police told me her name wasn't Chloe, when they told me her boyfriend was barely alive after being stabbed nearly a dozen times, I thought about the moment I opened that door, the moment I let her in. And sometimes, late at night, when the fridge hums too loud, when the shadows in my apartment stretch too long, I swear I can still hear the pounding. Not at the door, inside the walls. I never believed the air in a room could change the way a heartbeat feels until the day it did. That morning was supposed to be ordinary, and maybe that's what still unnerves me. How easily ordinary can unravel into something that has no name. My name is Claire Monroe, and if I close my eyes long enough, I can still smell the faint sting of bleach, hear the hollow echo of a motel faucet running somewhere in the dark. I was 23 then, a nursing student at Pellissippi State, and engaged to a boy I thought I would grow old with. Isaac Dalton, film student, dreamer, and the kind of man who carried his hope like a stone in his pocket, always turning it over, polishing it, refusing to let it wear down. He had this stubborn streak of optimism, even when bills stacked up on the counter and I caught him staring into the refrigerator like he expected groceries to appear by sheer will. He had bought that hulking Macron Vertex 950 workstation a year before, sinking money we didn't have into something he swore would change our lives. I told him it felt like paying for a wedding band before a proposal. Hopeful, premature, reckless. But I loved him, and love softens the edge of criticism. At least it used to. By September of 1995, his optimism had run out. The machine became a relic, gleaming black, heavy as grief, sitting in the corner of our apartment like a silent witness to his failures. He decided to sell it. Just a short ad in the classifieds, no picture, just numbers and specs and the words "serious inquiries only." I didn't think much would come of it. Not in Knoxville, where people still thought the internet was some futuristic toy cities like New York were experimenting with. But then the phone rang. The man called himself Thomas Reed. His voice was the kind that didn't need to raise itself, calm, measured, with a confidence that slotted neatly into silence. He said he was a freelance systems architect working with an aerospace firm in Georgia. He needed that exact model. He would pay more than Isaac asked if Isaac delivered it personally. He offered gas money, even a motel if we needed it. I remember staring at Isaac across the room, shaking my head before he even finished the call. "It's too good, Isaac," I said afterward, arms crossed, my voice hard because I needed him to hear me. Someone offers more than asking, changes the meeting place and wants you to drive 4 hours? That doesn't add up. He laughed, trying to brush it off. But he knew my radar, knew I had the kind of instinct that wasn't loud but wasn't wrong either. "Then come with me, Claire." He said it half challenge, half plea, and I did. Because love isn't just about trust. It's about making sure the person you love doesn't walk blindly into something they can't walk back out of. The morning of September 24th was thick with fog, the kind that makes the world feel half-formed. The Honda Accord rattled down the highway with that monolith of a computer strapped into the back seat like some absurd passenger. Isaac kept the radio low, classic rock dissolving into static every few miles. I sipped bitter gas station coffee and tried to ignore the weight in my stomach that had nothing to do with caffeine. Half an hour outside Marietta, the phone rang again. I saw Isaac's knuckles tighten around the wheel as he answered. Thomas's voice, smooth, unhurried, filtered through. Construction at the office park, he claimed. We'd have to meet at the Sunset Inn just off the interstate. I caught Isaac's eyes when he hung up. He forced a smile. Broad daylight, quick handoff. We'll be fine. The Sunset Inn sagged into itself like a building tired of standing. Faded green siding, a half-lit Coke machine that whined without working, a parking lot cracked open like old skin. My hand stayed near my bag, where a small can of pepper spray and a folding knife waited. The air felt wrong the second we stepped out, too still, like the world was holding its breath. Room 109. The door opened almost instantly, as if he'd been waiting. Thomas Reed wasn't remarkable. Khakis, maroon sweater, clean-shaven, sandy hair. He could have been anyone. Your math teacher, your neighbor, a man in line at the grocery store. That was the worst part. Evil should look different, feel different. But he smiled politely as though we were expected guests. The room smelled of stale smoke and citrus cleaner. Curtains drawn, bed neatly made. A laptop bag rested on the desk like an afterthought. He asked Isaac to power on the machine, and Isaac did, his fingers trembling slightly though he tried to hide it. The vertex hummed awake. Thomas leaned close, his eyes sharp, hungry. "This is perfect," he murmured, like he was speaking to himself. "Exactly what we need." Then he said his associate was on the way with the check. 15 minutes. Just a little more waiting. We made small talk. Or rather, they did. I stood by the door, listening to every word, my eyes darting to the parking lot beyond the curtains. Something about Thomas's rhythm unsettled me. His smile was too practiced. His jokes about Marietta felt rehearsed, borrowed from someone else. And then he suggested we load the computer into his car early, just to save time. I stepped forward. "We'll wait for the check." My voice was calm, but it cut the air like a knife. For the first time, something flickered in his expression, a crack in the mask. And though it smoothed away quickly, I knew I had seen the truth. Something cold, something that watched us like prey. Minutes dragged. Isaac and I stepped out to get coffee, biscuits in a paper sack, anything to break the tension. When we returned, the associate still hadn't come. Thomas chuckled about traffic, but his fingers tapped restlessly against his leg, and the air felt denser, as though the room itself was shrinking. Then, without ceremony, he stood. He moved with that same practiced calm, stepping to the side of the bed. His hand dipped down, smoothed the sheets, and rose again holding a black revolver. "Lie down. Wrap yourselves in the sheets. Don't move. Don't speak." His voice wasn't raised, but it commanded. Isaac froze. I didn't. "What the hell are you doing?" The words tore out of me, sharp, panicked. "This will be over soon," he said, almost kindly. "No one gets hurt if you do exactly as I say." We obeyed, not because we trusted him, but because the barrel of a gun makes choices meaningless. The sheets tangled around us, binding our arms awkwardly. My pulse pounded so hard it drowned out the hum of the air conditioner. Isaac's breath shook beside me. Then the first blow came. Not the gun. A hammer. The crack of metal on bone is not a sound you forget. Isaac's head snapped sideways, blood spattering across the sheet. My scream wasn't mine. It belonged to some feral creature inside me clawing to survive. The hammer lifted again, came down, again. Darkness rushed in, but not all the way. I remember flashes, the faucet running, the chemical burn of bleach, Thomas's figure moving methodically, wiping surfaces, humming under his breath. I remember a voice deep and low, not mine, not his. "Play dead." So I did. When silence fell and the door slammed, I stayed still. The sheet soaked through beneath me. My ears roared with static. I don't know how long I lay there before the maid found me, before the hallway filled with shouting and running feet. Isaac didn't make it. They said he lived for a while, long enough to be carried away, long enough for hope to flicker before it was crushed. I carried his blood under my nails for weeks. The police never proved who Thomas really was. They caught men who looked like him, men with records, with stories that mirrored ours. But every time the case bent toward closure, it snapped back into mystery. Witnesses contradicted each other. Sketches blurred. A suspect overdosed in his cell before trial. Evidence evaporated. It was like chasing smoke. And yet, I know what I saw, what I felt. He wasn't just a man. There was something else in that room, something that moved inside him or behind him, like a shadow wearing skin. The voice that told me to play dead, it didn't sound like mercy. It sounded like possession, like hunger deciding to spare me for reasons I can't understand. Years have passed, but the fear hasn't. It seeps into quiet rooms, into the static between radio stations, into motel curtains that don't quite close. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I hear his voice again. Calm, polite, patient. This will be over soon. But it never is. Silence should be safe. That's what I used to believe until the night I learned that silence can listen back. I never expected to be 26 and crawling back to my mother's house. Not after everything I had built for myself in Los Angeles. Not with my 19-year-old sister in tow and the entire wreck of my life shoved into the trunk of a beat-up sedan. Yet that's exactly where I found myself in October of 2011, pushing east on I-40 with swollen eyes, a pounding headache, and a hollow ache I couldn't name. Only a week earlier I'd been engaged, picking out venues, thumbing through bridal magazines, holding up rings in the sun like a child with a toy. Then it had collapsed in a blur of shouting, betrayal, and the kind of heartbreak that doesn't just sit in your chest but knots your stomach and makes you physically ill. My fiancé had been cheating. When I found out, when I screamed, when I begged for the smallest sliver of remorse, he didn't even care. He stood there cold, unbothered, as though the last 2 years hadn't meant a damn thing. The engagement ring that once sparkled like hope now sat at the bottom of my purse, heavy as an anchor. The only person who hadn't said "I told you so" was Clara, my little sister. Reckless, restless, so sure the world was hers to take. At 19, she seemed fearless in a way I used to envy. But when I broke, she was there. She didn't mock me. She didn't hesitate. When I told her I was leaving, she threw her bag into the back seat and said, "Then I'm coming with you." The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, flat and desolate, the horizon dissolving into blackness as the sun bled out behind us. The headlights carved tunnels through the dark. Clara had her earbuds in, scrolling her phone, humming faintly to whatever music she'd half forgotten to turn down. My hands clamped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached, because some irrational part of me believed that if I loosened my grip, the road itself would vanish. By the time the lights of Flagstaff shimmered ahead, exhaustion had burrowed deep into my bones. My eyes burned. My body was brittle. Every part of me begged to stop. So when the neon sign appeared, Blue Horizon Motel, its lights sputtering, half the letters dead, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like collapse. The lot was cracked asphalt littered with broken glass and cigarette butts. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and mildew. My stomach curled. Clara's nose wrinkled. But she didn't argue when I muttered, "It's just one night. We'll be gone by morning." Inside, the manager sat behind the counter, pale under the buzzing fluorescent light. He barely looked at me. His hands trembled as he pushed the key across the counter. His left wrist was bandaged, the gauze fresh, spotted faintly with red as though whatever cut it hadn't stopped bleeding. His eyes flicked up once, watery and hollow, then slid away again, as though meeting mine was dangerous. The whole exchange lasted seconds, but the unease it left in me rooted deep. Room 12 smelled of bleach and dampness, an odor that clung heavy in the air, seeping into my clothes. The sheets didn't match. The carpet was sticky underfoot. The lamp buzzed with a faint, sickly hum. Clara tossed her bag onto the bed and flopped down with a groan. "This place gives me the creeps." I forced a laugh. Better than sleeping in the car. Even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. We showered, changed, killed the lights. For a few minutes, the silence of the desert pressed in, heavy and absolute. Almost enough to let me believe we'd sleep. But silence is rarely absolute. I woke to Clara whispering. Her voice was sharp, breathy, almost panicked. "Evie, do you hear that?" I blinked, disoriented. Then I heard it. Not the groan of pipes, not the settling of old walls. Voices. They floated through the vent above the bed, muffled at first but distinct. A woman's voice cracking, pleading. A man's low and rough, words swallowed in growls. And then, something softer. A child's voice, thin, repetitive. The words came clearer with each second, until I froze. "Hide, Mommy, hide. Hide, Mommy, hide." Clara's eyes were wide, her blanket clutched to her chin. "Someone's fighting. We should call the desk." I shook my head, though my stomach was coiled tight. This wasn't just a fight. The woman's tone wasn't only angry, it was desperate, begging. The man's voice was darker, guttural. And that child. God, the repetition. Hide, Mommy, hide. I slid out of bed, bare feet sticking to the carpet. Thin walls, I whispered, though my voice betrayed me. I pressed my ear closer to the vent. The woman's voice rose, breaking. The man's growls overlapped, the child's chant repeating faster. Hide, Mommy, hide, hide, hide. And then it stopped. Cut off. Mid-word. The silence that followed was unnatural, too sudden, like something holding its breath. Clara's whisper was frantic. Evie, please, let's just go. We can't. It's the middle of the night. Where would we even go? But even as I said it, I wanted nothing more than to run. That's when I saw it. Scratched into the wood of the nightstand, faint but legible under the flickering lamp. Do not listen to them. They know you are here. My breath caught sharp in my throat. Clara whispered, "What if it's that creep from the gas station? What if he followed us?" I didn't answer. I dragged the chair against the door, turned on every light, and sat rigid on the bed, heart hammering. The voices didn't return, but the silence weighed heavier than ever, as though the motel itself was aware of us. We sat awake until gray light seeped through the curtains. Clara's hands trembled as she shoved clothes into her bag. She didn't speak, but I could see her fear mirrored in mine. At the front desk, I stopped cold. A missing persons poster was taped beside the register. A woman and a little boy, smiling. Date missing, October 9th, 2010. 1 year ago. Same day, same motel. Clara followed my gaze, her lips parted, soundless. The manager looked up. For the first time, his eyes locked on mine, and he smiled. It wasn't kind, it was knowing, like he understood exactly what we'd heard. I grabbed Clara's hand, muttered thanks, and pulled her out. We didn't breathe until the blue horizon shrank to nothing in the rearview mirror. But the farther we drove, the harder it became to convince myself it had been imagination. The voices had been too vivid, too exact. The words carved into the nightstand weren't random. They were a message, a warning. Clara stared out the window all day. Finally, she whispered, "Do you think that woman and her son, that's who we heard?" I didn't answer, but I knew. That night in a cleaner motel, I left the TV on. The laugh track washed over us, a shallow comfort. Silence felt dangerous now. When I closed my eyes, I saw the manager's trembling hands, the bandaged wrist, the strange half-smile. Was he complicit? Trapped? Watching us like he'd watched others? I never told anyone, not even when we reached our mother's house the next night. But sometimes, late at night, when the heater clicks on or the pipes rattle in the walls, I hear it again. Faint, almost beneath hearing. Hide, Mommy, hide. And I wonder if we ever really left room 12 behind. I only wanted a bed for the night, but the motel gave me something I can't seem to wake up from. I wasn't planning to stay at a motel that night. If things had gone the way they were supposed to, I would have been home by 10:30, maybe 11 at the latest. But life had a way of chewing up plans and spitting out exhaustion. I had been covering a last-minute shift at the warehouse in Ukiah after one of the forklift guys slipped and sprained his wrist, and by the time I clocked out, I could barely keep my head upright behind the wheel. My eyelids felt like they were lined with sandpaper. My hands ached from clutching the steering wheel too tight, and my stomach growled with that sick emptiness that comes when you've pushed yourself too long. I knew better than to risk the long drive back to Fremont. I'd been down that road before, almost nodding off, jolting awake only when the car veered slightly into the rumble strip. That hollow dread in my chest told me I wouldn't get lucky twice. I needed a bed. Any bed. It was late September of 2022. I'd been bouncing between temp jobs in rural Mendocino County, staying in whatever rooms I could afford. That week I was in Cloverdale, crashing in the half of a trailer rented out by a guy I found on Craigslist for $60 a night. It was the kind of place where the blinds never quite shut, where you weren't sure if the stains on the floor were coffee or blood, and where the sound of skittering under the sink kept me up. I'd already found what I thought were mouse droppings in the microwave, and the thought of curling up there again after the shift made my skin crawl. So I did what anyone desperate would do. I pulled out my phone and searched Google Maps. Motel near me. Only one popped up within 15 miles, Redwood Pines Motel. The name struck me, almost too nice, too pretty for the kind of backwoods I was in. The listing was bare, no website, no reviews, just a pin on Route 162 and a number. Still, I was too tired to be picky. I dialed. A man answered after 2 rings. His voice was gravelly, older, mid-60s maybe. Not unkind, but flat. "Yeah, we've got vacancy. Room 7, just show up. Don't worry about paperwork." That should have been a red flag. Places always wanted paperwork. Even the sleaziest motels wanted ID to cover their asses. But instead of questioning it, I mumbled something about being 25 minutes away. "That's fine. Room 7's yours," he said, and then hung up. No confirmation, no details, just that. By the time I pulled off the highway, it was past 12:40. A long gravel road stretched ahead, swallowed by a wall of pine trees. The deeper I drove, the air shifted, cooler, heavier, like something pressing down on my skin. I turned off the radio and rolled the window open a crack. The forest hummed with insects, but every so often there came a distant cry I couldn't place. Half animal, half something else. Then I saw it. Redwood Pines Motel. It looked like it had been forgotten by time. A squat L-shaped building, maybe 8 rooms total. Beige siding faded to near gray. Doors with peeling numbers, some missing entirely. A small wooden office shack in front, lit by a single yellow porch bulb that flickered like it was gasping for life. The lot was empty. No cars, no voices, no movement. The kind of stillness that feels rehearsed. I almost kept driving. Almost. But the ache in my body begged for rest, and I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I parked. Before I could step out, the door to the office creaked open and the man from the phone stepped outside. Tall, easily 6'2", thin in a wiry way, with long gray hair tied back in a low ponytail. He wore a heavy flannel even though the air was still warm. His face was all lines and shadows, the kind that only come from decades of sun exposure. But his mouth didn't match. His mouth was straight, as if smiling had never occurred to him. "You the one who called?" His voice was the same. Flat, not unfriendly, but not warm. "Yeah," I said, stepping out. "Just need a room for the night. Real short stay." He didn't answer right away. Just looked me over, his eyes flicking from my face to my shoes, to the bag slung over my shoulder. Then he nodded once and motioned me toward the office. Inside, it smelled of damp paper and stale smoke. A single desk, old as hell, sat in the middle. He pulled out a card reader that looked like it belonged in the 90s, the kind with a cord that needed a phone jack. I handed over my card and ID. He barely glanced at them before swiping. "Room 7, he said, pulling a brass key on a leather fob from under the desk. It was heavy, cool in my palm. He paused, his eyes locked on mine, sharp for the first time. "Extra towels in the closet. No room service. Try not to wander the grounds too much. Forest out here's thick." The way he said it, it wasn't a warning, it was an instruction. I forced a small nod and left. Room 7 was at the far end of the strip, swallowed in shadow. The outside bulb above the door was dead, so I had to use my phone flashlight to guide the key into the knob. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew and lemon cleaner. Not filthy, but not fresh either. The walls were a queasy green. The bedspread a stiff floral quilt that looked older than me. A box TV sat lifeless on the dresser. The heater clanged once and then died. I didn't care. I dropped my bag, set my phone alarm for 6, and collapsed on top of the quilt fully dressed. The weight of exhaustion pulled me under before I even turned off the light. I don't know how long I slept, maybe an hour. But I woke to the sound of knocking. 2 soft raps on the door. Deliberate. My heart thudded. I waited. Another knock. Just as soft but quicker. I checked my phone. 2:07 a.m. I held still, barely breathing. Whoever it was didn't speak, didn't try the knob, just stood there. A third knock, then silence. I crept to the window, peeled the curtain back just a sliver. The lot was empty. The office shack dark. The forest beyond, a solid wall of black. And then, movement, something low to the ground, sliding just outside the circle of the porch light. Crawling. I blinked, and it was gone. The rest of the night, I sat on the edge of the bed with the brass key clutched in one hand and the rusted nightstand lamp in the other. My body screamed for sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me close my eyes. Just before dawn, another sound. A door creaking open somewhere along the strip. Then, footsteps. Barefoot. Slow. I opened my own door a crack. That's when I saw her. A woman, mid-40s maybe, barefoot, a long white nightgown brushing her ankles. She walked across the lot like she was underwater, arms loose, eyes wide and unblinking. Her skin was pale, waxy in the half-light. "Ma'am," I whispered, barely louder than breath. No reaction. She passed me without a glance, moving straight into the woods. Her gown snagged on the underbrush, but she didn't pause. Didn't even blink. I stood there, frozen. Then instinct yanked me toward the office. I banged on the locked door until my fists stung. Nothing. I pulled my phone, no bars. Not a single flicker of signal. When I turned back, he was there. The man from the office. Standing at the tree line, barefoot too, watching me. That woman, room 3. She walked into the woods. She didn't look right. Do you know her? His expression didn't change. Then, slowly, he smiled, barely, and walked back into the office without a word. I left. I drove until I hit a gas station in Ukiah and finally got service. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type, but I searched for the motel. It took some digging, but I found it. An old article from 2006. Redwood Pines Motel had been shut down after a series of unexplained incidents. Guests disappearing, locals reporting strange noises from the forest, a body, half buried, found near room 3. The place had reopened in 2020. New management. No records of who owned it now. The man I saw. The woman in the woods. None of it made sense. Unless that was the point. Unless the motel wasn't a place for people like me to rest. Unless it was something else entirely. And the worst part? When I checked my phone later, scrolling back through my call log, I realized something. The number I'd dialed wasn't there. It had never been saved. Never been logged. Just silence. And silence, I've learned, doesn't mean empty. Sometimes, silence listens back. I always thought silence was harmless, until the night I learned that silence can breathe. My name is Lynn Tran, though back then, in the town that barely existed on the map, everyone called me Lily. I let them. It was easier than correcting their tongues, easier than carrying the small wince of mispronunciation every time my name was spoken. A name is supposed to anchor you, but mine always felt like a fragile boat adrift in waters that weren't mine. I had crossed an ocean already. Sometimes it seemed I was still crossing it. I had been in America 6 years by 1997, long enough to understand most words, but not always their edges. Back home, words carried weight, courtesy folded inside tone. Here, people let their sentences hang out like laundry, loose, careless, sometimes harsh. I worked the night shift at the Pine Creek Inn, a forgotten motel off a barely lit Maryland highway. If you blinked while driving past, you missed it. Just a faded 2-story block wedged between a rusting diner and a gas station where pumps groaned and sometimes clicked, without giving you a drop of gas. From the outside, the Pine Creek Inn looked like all the other tired motels across the country. sickly yellow siding, mildew-stained shutters, a buzzing neon sign that stuttered between Pine and Carquet as if even the word creek had abandoned us. The highway out front carried truckers, drifters, and out-of-staters who had taken a wrong turn. Not tourists, never families. Just the kind of people who wanted a bed, not questions. The manager, George, was a heavy-set man with gray hair that smelled permanently of menthols. He'd sit behind the front desk like a rock in a river, letting things flow around him, barely lifting his eyes. He liked me, though. Said I was quiet and didn't stir the pot. He wasn't wrong. I did my rounds, cleaned the rooms, carried fresh sheets. I laughed at his stale jokes when he bothered to make them. I kept my inner thoughts folded tightly, like origami shapes no one else would ever see. People here never knew what to do with my silences. They thought I was shy, maybe timid. What I never told them was that silence was how I survived camps, border crossings, ocean nights where water slapped wood and people whispered prayers they didn't believe. Silence was armor. And yet, sometimes silence felt alive. I noticed things George didn't. Subtle cues. The way guests avoided eye contact when lying about how many people would be staying. The way a wife's voice tightened around the word husband when the man beside her wasn't wearing a ring. I noticed when people pretended to be normal but weren't. That, I think, is why I noticed him. It was late October, the air thin with cold that hadn't settled in yet, when the black Lincoln Town car pulled in. I was inside room 202, changing pillowcases, when headlights swept across the curtain and startled me. I peeked out just in time to see a man step from the car. He wore a long gray coat, too heavy for the weather, and black gloves, though the night was mild. A fedora shadowed his face, sharp and deliberate, like a costume piece chosen with intent. He didn't rush. Every movement was slow, as though time bent for him, as though he carried his own clock separate from ours. He stood by the car longer than necessary, head tilted toward the motel, studying it. Not the way a guest does, but the way someone appraises a place for weaknesses. Then he walked inside. From down the hall I heard George's monotone. "Name?" The man's reply was low, carefully measured. "Maddox." The syllables carried like smoke through the hall, seeping under doors, lodging in my chest. George muttered, typed, swiped a card without checking ID. This was still the 90s, no cameras, no fuss. He handed over the key to room 204. I stayed behind the curtain, watching his back disappear up the stairs. No suitcase, no duffel, not even a newspaper tucked under his arm. He vanished behind the door, and just like that, the air in the hallway changed. For the first week, he was hardly seen. The Do Not Disturb sign hung steady. Light seeped beneath the door at all hours, a sickly yellow glow. Once, passing late, I caught a faint whiff of something. Old cologne, sharp and bitter, though George told me he never saw the man smoke or wear scent. Another time I swear I smelled cigarette ash, but George's menthols were nowhere near. The scents came like ghosts, clinging only to that stretch of hall. And then there were the sounds. At first it was a murmur, like a radio too low to distinguish words. But one night, I paused outside 204 and realized it wasn't a voice at all. It was a scraping sound, slow, deliberate, metal dragging across something solid, followed by a soft, rhythmic thudding. I pressed my ear closer. The thuds were uneven, like footsteps that faltered, or something being dropped, lifted, and dropped again. My breath caught. A shiver climbed my arms. I backed away, pretending I hadn't stopped at all. George was no help. When I asked casually if Maddox ever spoke more than a few words, he shrugged, flicked ash into a paper tray, and said, "Guy comes down once a night for coffee. That's it. Weird maybe, but harmless." But harmless wasn't the word I'd use. Each time I passed 204, the static in the air prickled my skin. Sometimes I thought I heard a faint hiss like wires buzzing. Once I caught sight of my own reflection in the dark glass of a window across the hall and flinched, certain there was someone standing beside me. only it was just me, pale and tired, clutching my rag bucket too tightly. The weeks passed like that, a slow drip of unease. 31 nights. Then, on the 32nd morning, the Do Not Disturb sign was gone. George left a note in my cubby. 204 checked out overnight. Key left on counter. Please clean thoroughly. I stared at the door for a long time before I touched the knob. My chest felt tight, like the hallway itself didn't want me to enter. The moment the door opened, a wall of cold air hit me. Not the ordinary draft of an unused room. This was freezing, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath fogged, the thermostat was off, and then the smell, foul, metallic, like meat left too long in winter air. It coiled in my throat, made me swallow hard to keep from gagging. The room was in shambles. The bed stripped of sheets, mattress stained at the corners. Dresser drawers yanked out and scattered. A towel crumpled on the floor, stiff, dark-stained, unwashed. The desk chair overturned, as if someone had risen too quickly or been pulled away. I stepped forward, though every part of me screamed to step back. The bathroom door creaked when I pushed it. Inside, the tile gleamed clean, too clean, except on the mirror, smeared across the glass, were streaks of brown-red, finger marks dragged frantic and uneven. And in the center, scrawled with shaking desperation, I am not the only one. I stumbled back, hand against my mouth. That was when I saw it. The toilet lid was up. Inside, waterlogged, swollen, a single black glove floated. Waiting. I froze there until my knees gave, then ran for George. He cursed his way upstairs, but when he stepped inside, the color drained from his face. His cigarette trembled between fingers stained yellow. He whispered, "Call the cops." Now. The police came. First 2 cruisers, then an unmarked sedan. Soon the parking lot was lit with flashing blue that reflected off the motel's peeling paint like broken glass. Officers tramped through the hall, radios crackling, their voices too loud for the narrow space. I stood near the vending machine with my hands clenched in front of me, fingernails pressing crescents into my palms. They asked questions in quick, blunt English that still tangled in my ears when nerves got in the way. How long had the man been here? Did I ever enter the room before today? Did I speak with him? Did he give a name? I answered carefully, each word chosen like stepping stones across a stream. I could feel George's eyes on me, cigarette dangling from his lips, though he wasn't allowed to smoke indoors when the cops were present. His silence was its own answer. He wanted this done fast. He didn't like attention on the Pine Creek Inn. None of us did. The motel owner arrived, sweating through his polyester suit, shaking hands with the detectives, muttering apologies. I barely listened. My ears kept straining toward room 204, where officers moved about, cameras clicking, voices lowered now. The air that leaked from that doorway was still unnaturally cold. Even the cops commented on it. One muttered, "Feels like a goddamn icebox in here," though the heat was on full blast everywhere else. They bagged the glove, photographed the mirror. One officer bent close, squinting at the smeared words, then stepped back quickly, almost tripping over himself like the letters had shifted when he looked too hard. I didn't sleep that day. I lay awake in my small rented apartment above the nail salon, listening to the pipes hum and pop, imagining footsteps pacing outside my door. When I did drift off, I dreamed of yellow light seeping beneath a door, spreading across the floor like something alive. 2 weeks later, the news came. A body had been found half a mile into the woods behind the motel. A waitress from Delaware missing for over a month. Hair chopped off, hands bound with black tape. They didn't say much else on TV, but the details slipped through whispers at the diner. Everyone was talking about it, though no one wanted to say the motel's name out loud. The glove, the same brand found near her grave, matched the one in the toilet. But they never confirmed it belonged to Maddox. No fingerprints, no license plate, no sign the Lincoln had ever existed. It was as though the man had erased himself entirely, leaving only the echo of his presence behind. I quit the next day. When I told George I was done, he didn't argue. He only nodded, ground out his cigarette in a chipped ashtray and muttered, "Can't say I blame you." He quit a month later. The motel closed for renovations that never happened. I moved to North Carolina into my cousin's spare room. I worked at a small Vietnamese grocery, stacked cans, rang up purchases. I told myself I had left the Pine Creek Inn behind. But you can't always leave places. Sometimes they come with you. At first it was subtle. A flickering bulb in the grocery store's back room, always the one above my head when I counted boxes. A faint metallic tang in the air whenever the wind shifted, though no one else seemed to notice. Once I turned the corner of an aisle and swore I smelled that old cologne, bitter and sharp, though the store carried no perfumes. At night I would wake with the sheets damp against my skin, certain I'd heard the sound of a slow scrape, followed by a rhythmic thud somewhere in the apartment. My cousin said it was just the neighbors, thin walls. But I'd lived in enough places with thin walls to know the difference between human movement and something else. The dreams grew worse. I'd stand in a motel hallway that stretched endlessly, each door marked 204, each one leaking yellow light. When I touched a knob, it was ice cold, and from the other side came a whisper that I couldn't quite translate. Sometimes in the dream it was Vietnamese, sometimes English, sometimes both at once, overlapping until meaning dissolved into pure sound. I tried to tell myself it was stress, trauma lingering in the body, but the more I tried to rationalize, the stranger things became. One evening, walking home from work, I stopped at a crosswalk and glanced at the glass window of a pawn shop. My reflection stood beside me, clutching her grocery bag, tired, hair falling loose. Only for a moment, I thought I saw another figure reflected beside me, a tall man in a gray coat, fedora tilted low. When I spun around, the sidewalk was empty. Cars rolled by, indifferent. I didn't sleep that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning, listening for the sound of someone breathing in rhythm with mine. Weeks turned to months. I tried to build new routines. Morning tea, walks through the park, small talk with customers. On the outside, I was quiet, steady, hardworking. On the inside, my thoughts twisted tighter each day like threads wound until they threatened to snap. Once I returned home to find the mirror above my bathroom sink fogged with condensation, though I hadn't run hot water. In the center, faint as though traced by a fingertip, were streaks, not words, just the outline of a handprint. I scrubbed it away until the glass squealed. Another night, in the quiet just before dawn, I woke to the sensation of cold air pooling at the foot of my bed. My cousin's apartment had poor heating, but this was different. The kind of cold that tightened the skin, made the breath cloud. I pulled the blanket to my chin and closed my eyes. Behind my lids, I saw the mirror in room 204 again, the smeared words trembling as though they'd been written by someone in mid-panic. I am not the only one. I began to wonder if the message had been meant for me, if whoever wrote it knew someone else would eventually enter that room, would see it, would carry it away like a brand. Some nights, when the wind cut thin through the cracks of the old apartment, I heard the faint creak of a motel door. The sound made my stomach drop, even though logic told me no motel existed here. Not anymore. I thought leaving Maryland meant leaving it behind. But the truth pressed heavier each year. Maybe I never left that room at all. Maybe a part of me stayed there, frozen in the moment I first stepped inside, trapped like breath on cold glass. Sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I don't recognize my own face at first. Not because I've changed, but because for the briefest flicker, I expect to see someone else staring back. And every time I catch my reflection too long, I hear it, the faintest scrape, followed by a single hollow thud, as though something on the other side of the glass is knocking to be let out. I still tell myself it's memory, trauma, ghosts that live only in the mind. But then the air turns cold again, and I smell that bitter cologne, and I remember the words on the mirror, words I cannot scrub away no matter how many years pass. I am not the only one. And I wonder, if I am not the only one, then who else has carried him away with them? Who else feels his silence breathing just over their shoulder? The first time I walked into the Horizon Pines Motel, I felt something watching me. Not someone. Something. The manager was there, sure, slouched behind the desk, smelling like weed and Red Bull, thumbs tapping at his phone without even lifting his head when I walked in. But that wasn't it. The air had weight, like the place itself noticed me, like it drew a long, slow breath the moment I crossed the threshold. I told myself I was imagining things. I was young, tired, barely scraping 4 hours of sleep most days, but that feeling stuck. The way cigarette smoke clings to your hair long after you've left the bar. I was 19, broke, restless. Nights at the gas station, mornings scrubbing the pines, saving for tuition that always felt further away the harder I worked. Sumfield, Nebraska wasn't a place you escaped easily. Town might be generous. It was more like a bruise along Highway 16, a diner with sticky menus, a liquor store that didn't check IDs, a gas station where I learned how to keep my voice calm when someone with glassy eyes and shaking hands wanted cigarettes at 3 a.m. The kind of place you grew old fast, the kind of place you either left behind or drowned in. The Horizon Pines Motel looked like it was dying in the sun. Stucco walls faded almost pink, paint peeling from the doors, a buzzing neon sign missing its middle letters so it read, "Whore on Pines." 2 floors stretched long along the highway, box fans whirring in the open doorways on summer mornings to try and air out the stink. That place was a nest for people the town didn't want to claim. Tweakers, drifters, men who paid cash and didn't give names. I wasn't alone in it. My crew was Marble and Caleb. Marble was in her 40s, Guatemalan, English-clipped and careful. She wore the same gold cross every single day, tucked just inside her blouse but always visible, as if it wasn't jewelry so much as armor. She cleaned like a machine, efficient, precise, never wasted movement. Sweet woman, but she had a way of looking at you sometimes, sharp, like she knew what you were about to do before you did it. Caleb was younger, early 20s maybe, tall and all elbows and knees, with tattoos that looked like he picked them from random Pinterest boards. He was unreliable, sometimes late, sometimes wired, sometimes smelling like he'd just fallen out of a bar. But when he worked fast. He'd joke sometimes, make the hours lighter. Other times he'd get quiet, withdrawn, eyes darting like he was hearing things no one else could. We had a rhythm. I did the first floor, Marble the second. Caleb floated. Most days blurred into the same routine. Strip beds, scrub sinks, replace little bottles of shampoo, and hope you didn't walk in on someone tweaking or passed out cold. Most rooms were forgettable. But room 209 wasn't. The day it started, July had baked the world into something unbearable. The kind of heat that hums in your ears, warps the air over pavement. I was in 203, bent over the counter scrubbing toothpaste flecks, when I heard Marble's voice down the hall. Not her usual soft voice, not even angry. It was sharp, Dios mio, loud and raw, cutting through the buzzing box fans. I dropped the rag and ran. When I reached 209, Caleb was already there, standing stiff inside the doorway. He wasn't moving, just staring. His face, usually careless, smirking, looked tight, like he was trying to process something he didn't have words for. Marble stood dead center in the room, both hands pressed tight over her cross, lips moving in Spanish. Her eyes never blinked. "What's going on?" I asked, breathless. Caleb just lifted a hand and pointed. I looked up. At first I didn't get it. The bed was made, towels folded, window cracked open just a sliver to let in the microwaved air. Normal. Then I looked higher. Footprints. Dark, dusty, bare footprints across the ceiling. Left, right, left. Flat against the surface, as if someone had walked up the wall and across the ceiling like it was nothing. They started above the bed, climbed straight up, and ended at the tall window. The top pane of glass had a clean crack through it, like something had stepped out. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to talk. Maybe someone climbed? Fell? I don't know. Caleb's head shook slowly. His voice was flat. No scuffs. No furniture moved. Nothing on the wall. And look at those prints. They're not angled. They're flat. Marble began to cry then. Not loud. A soft, breathless sob. Her prayers slipped out in trembling Spanish. That was when I noticed the air. Heavy. Thick. Not hot. Not cold. But wrong. Like breathing through cotton. My skin prickled. Something in me screamed to step back, but I didn't. I just stood there with them, staring. We finished the shift in silence. No music from Caleb's busted speaker. No jokes. Just silence. After that, Marble refused 209, begged to switch assignments, sometimes in tears. The cross never left her grip when we passed that door. So I took it. Not out of bravery, because I didn't believe. Meth made people do insane things. I told myself some tweaker had done a stunt, thrown someone. Human bodies could terrify you when they forgot the rules. That was easier than anything else. But still, every time I opened 209, something in me clenched. They painted over the ceiling eventually. Cheap off-white, didn't match. But it didn't matter. I still saw the prints, and I never turned my back to the window. Weeks later, I was alone in 209, vacuum humming under me. That's when I first heard it. A faint scraping. Not loud, just a whisper above me, like nails dragging lightly across plaster. I froze, turned off the vacuum. The sound stopped. I stood there, waiting. But all I heard was the highway outside. I shook it off. Pipes, I told myself. The building settling. I turned the vacuum back on, humming, filling my head. And that's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a smudge behind the curtain. I stepped closer. The light from the window hit just right, pale and milky in the late morning, catching against the glass. And there it was. A handprint. Small. Child-sized. On the inside of the glass. The light made it shimmer faintly, every ridge and line visible as though whoever pressed it there had oily skin, sweat. Tiny fingers splayed upward. My chest went cold. The room was on the second floor. No balcony. No way for a kid to be there. And the print was too high, level with my face, maybe higher. Then, faint, almost like a trick, came the sound again. Scraping. From the ceiling, just above the bed. I stared at the glass, at the pale light bending around the little hand, and for one awful second I swore the fingers shifted. The vacuum cord slipped from my shoulder. I wiped the glass clean, hard, until it squeaked under my rag, and I never told anyone. But that night, in my narrow trailer bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that small palm pressed flat, waiting. I used to think memory was solid, something I could lean on. But at the Desert Rose, I learned it can shift like shadows, until you can't tell if yesterday ever happened at all. When I checked into the Desert Rose Motor Lodge off Highway 59, I told myself it was temporary. Just a week, maybe 2, while I healed. My knee had been split open and rebuilt with metal, a hinge where bone used to be. It still burned when I bent it, a hot pulse that reminded me every step that I wasn't whole. The doctor said recovery was about patience, but patience feels like weakness when you're 29 and watching your life slide out of reach. The Desert Rose was the kind of place you didn't brag about staying in. Stucco walls, once painted pink, had bleached into something closer to spoiled meat, and cracks ran across them like veins. The neon sign outside buzzed, stuttered, and sometimes cut out entirely, leaving the lot swallowed in darkness until it coughed back to life. The pool had been drained years ago. Weeds pushed up through the cracked cement where water used to glimmer. The vending machines in the lobby took your quarters with no promise of a Coke in return. But it was $32 a night, cheaper if I paid weekly, and the rooms came with a bed, a table, and a bathroom that always smelled faintly of bleach and mildew. That was all I needed, or so I told myself. My days fell into a pattern. In the mornings, I tried to follow the therapist's instructions. Stretch bands, light weights, the slow bend and straighten of the new joint until sweat trickled down my back. Then I drove to the therapy center in town where some kid barely older than me pushed and pulled my leg until I thought I'd scream. Back in my room, I iced the knee, read books I barely absorbed, scribbled thoughts into a leather journal. At night, when silence pressed in, the ache of loneliness felt worse than the ache of the joint. I noticed the manager right away. His name was Pete, though it never felt like a real name when he said it. He was tall, pale, with a long face that might have looked kindly if it weren't stretched into the same rehearsed grin every time I saw him. His words were always the same too, like lines he'd memorized from a script. "How's that knee? Need extra towels?" His teeth never seemed to part enough for the words to be genuine, and though he smiled, his eyes never lingered on mine. They jittered, restless, as if watching for something else. The first night was uneventful. I heard voices through the thin walls, muffled, indistinct. I thought little of it. Cheap motels aren't known for peace. But the second night I woke to crying. Not loud, not hysterical, just a soft, broken sob that carried through the plaster. My breath caught in my chest. A man's voice followed, harsh and cutting, telling her to be quiet. A door slammed. Feet pounded the walkway. My hand hovered over the phone, but I let it fall. Arguments happen, I told myself. Travelers fight. I didn't want to be the kind of woman who saw ghosts in every noise. But the third night I saw her, I'd been standing at the window, curtain cracked just enough, staring out at the flickering neon that sputtered in half-light. That's when the door to room 237 opened. A girl stepped out with an ice bucket clasped to her chest. She was young. Too young. 15, maybe 16 at most. Her eyes darted around, wide and hollow. For a second she looked toward me, and even through the reflection of glass I felt the terror radiate from her face. Then a hand, large, rough, shot out of the doorway, seized her arm and yanked her back inside. The door slammed. I stayed frozen at the window, every muscle locked. The world outside looked exactly the same. The buzzing light, the empty lot. The doors lined up in their neat row, but something inside me shifted. That thin line between ignore it and pay attention snapped. The next morning, I tried to ask. Rosa, the housekeeper, was pushing her cart along the balcony when I stopped her. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, hair tied back in a bun that loosened as she worked, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Busy week for you?" I asked casually. She gave me a polite laugh, though it didn't reach her eyes. When I mentioned 237, her smile dropped. Her shoulders stiffened so abruptly I felt it in my own chest. "They pay cash," she said quickly, not meeting my eyes. Then she pushed her cart forward, muttering, "Always cash." Her mop water sloshed dark across the walkway, leaving a streak that looked too much like blood in the sun. That night, I set up my old camcorder on the table facing the window. It was a clunky relic from the 90s, resolution grainy and sound muffled, but I wanted proof. Evidence felt safer than memory. Through the viewfinder, I captured cars pulling in, men going in and out of 237. One of them carried a box too heavy for him, another lingered on the walkway like he was keeping watch. When Rosa knocked and delivered towels to a room that never asked for them, I recorded that too. Later, near the laundry room, I overheard her voice. "They scare me. I can't keep doing this," she whispered, almost pleading. Pete's reply was low and sharp, a knife cutting air. "Keep your mouth shut if you want your paycheck." I backed away before either of them saw me. That night, when the knock came at my door, I almost didn't answer. It was soft, polite. I opened it. No one there. Just a folded piece of paper under the mat. 3 words in blocky handwriting, "Stay out of it." I sat on the bed with the note in my hand, staring at the door. My knee ached with a pulsing throb, but the ache in my chest was worse. Someone had seen me watching. Someone knew. I thought about calling my sister, but what could I tell her? That silence had hands, that a girl's eyes had reached through glass and gripped my soul. Instead, I stayed. And the motel changed. Not visibly, not in any way you could photograph. But everything tilted. The buzzing neon shifted pitch, almost like a voice learning to hum. The shadows under the door stretched too far across the carpet. Once, when I turned the TV off, it flickered back on with the volume low, showing static that hissed in a rhythm almost like breathing. My journal filled with notes, but when I read them back, they didn't make sense. The dates blurred. I couldn't tell if the crying I wrote about happened yesterday or last week. I remembered talking to Pete at the office door, but when? Had it been once, or every day? Sometimes I replayed conversations in my head, only to realize I couldn't tell if they'd happened at all. One morning, Rosa wheeled her cart past and dropped something near my door without looking. A folded napkin. Inside, "Don't trust him." That night, the voice through the wall wasn't Spanish anymore. It wasn't even male. It was me. My own voice whispering, "Stay out of it." I stumbled back, heart hammering, pressed my hands over my ears. But the whisper was inside, not outside. The nights blurred. I replayed the camcorder footage until I knew it frame by frame. And yet each time the girl looked closer to the lens. One night I swore her lips parted. Another night, I heard my name in a whisper I couldn't explain. Then came the screaming. It started as a crash, a shatter of glass or furniture. Then a girl's scream. High, desperate, ragged with terror. Fists pounded against the wall so hard I felt the plaster quake against my temple. I grabbed the phone, pressed it to my ear. Static hummed. No dial tone, no voice, nothing. When I yanked the cord out, I saw it wasn't plugged into the wall at all. The neon outside sputtered and went out. The lot plunged into black, and in that blackness, the window of 237 lit faintly from within. Faces pressed against the glass lined up in a row, pale, wide-eyed, mouths open in silent screams. Not one, not two, but dozens. Girls staring at me. The light flared. The window was empty. The pounding at my door came next. Not polite this time. The frame shook. The metal knob rattled. My knee burned as I crouched, clutching the journal like it could shield me. The pounding stopped. Silence pressed in. By morning, 237 was open and empty. The sheets stripped. The carpet soaked with something Rosa scrubbed on her knees until her hands bled. When I met her eyes, she raised a finger to her lips. Later, another napkin slid under my door. I'm sorry. Time fractured after that. I don't know how long I stayed. Days, weeks, each bleeding into the next. My notes contradict themselves. Sometimes I look at the handwriting and swear it isn't mine. Pete still greets me with the same wide grin. How's that knee? Need extra towels? Was it today? Yesterday? Last year? Last night I saw a car pull into the lot. A young couple stepped out, laughing nervously about the broken sign. Pete met them at the office door, grinning wide, handing them a key. Room 237. From my window, I watched them drag their suitcase inside. I tried to scream a warning, but no sound came. The walls swallowed my voice whole, and then I felt it. Warm breath against my ear, close enough that it stirred my hair. You never stayed out of it. Some places feel wrong before you even step inside them. You tell yourself it's exhaustion, or nerves, or the leftover taste of heartbreak that never seems to wash out of your mouth. But deep down, you know. You always know. I knew the second I saw that flickering neon sign in Winslow, Arizona, the one buzzing against the black desert night like a fly trapped under glass. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself I was being silly. I told myself a lot of things that night, and most of them were lies. My name is Lauren Hayes, and in the autumn of 1994, I was 25, broke, and pretending the hollow spaces in my life weren't expanding by the day. I had just walked out of a relationship that was supposed to end in a wedding. 3 years wasted on a man who had been splitting his life between me and someone else. When I found out, I packed 2 bags, left my apartment full of little plans we had made, and moved into a place that smelled like my neighbor's cigarette smoke and loneliness. That kind of betrayal doesn't just bruise you, it reorients everything. Suddenly, even the simplest routines feel fragile. I worked double shifts at the diner, refilling mugs for the same men who smirked over their eggs every morning, then came home to my stale apartment and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Stuck, restless, like the air itself had turned against me. So when my cousin Megan suggested a road trip, I said yes without thinking. She was 19, full of that buzzing energy that comes from not yet being broken by the world. She studied photography at the community college and had this obsession with chasing America's forgotten corners, abandoned gas stations, shuttered motels, the skeletal remains of towns that the interstate had passed by. She wanted photos for her portfolio. I wanted to feel like my life hadn't stalled completely. We left in my old Ford Taurus, its AC wheezing against the desert heat. The dashboard rattled, the tapes in my glove box chewed themselves into knots, and the road stretched forever, an endless belt of faded asphalt unraveling toward a horizon that never seemed to get closer. Arizona is the kind of place that makes you feel small, not in a poetic way, but in a way that presses on your chest until you forget how to breathe. Megan leaned out the window, her camera clicking at rusted billboards and collapsing motels, while I kept both hands clenched on the wheel. By the time we reached Winslow, the sun had drowned itself in the horizon, and the desert air felt thick, oppressive, like it was sitting on my skin. My eyelids burned from 12 hours of driving, and I was so desperate for a bed that I would have paid for a cot in a bus station. That's when I saw it. Sunset Vista Motel, vacancies available. The sign sputtered in weak orange, half its letters dead. The parking lot stretched under a broken street lamp, its pavement cracked and sprouting weeds. And beneath that lamp sat a black pickup truck, its windows glossy and dark. It didn't look parked, it looked stationed, like it had been waiting for someone. "Looks cheap," Megan said, her voice light, but her shoulders tense. "That's the point," I muttered, pulling in anyway. I wish I could say I didn't know better, but I did. I felt it the second my tires bumped over the cracked asphalt. That knot in my stomach wasn't new. It was survival trying to make itself heard. The lobby was worse. The air stank of smoke and mildew. A scratched plexiglass shield separated us from the clerk, a bald man with wet, pale eyes that never blinked in rhythm with his words. Behind him, a cuckoo clock ticked too loudly, filling the silence between his sentences like it wanted to smother us. "Cash only," he said before I could open my wallet. "Don't you take cards?" "Machine's broken, cash or no room." His tone wasn't annoyed, it wasn't apologetic. It was flat, mechanical, as though he'd said those words 1,000 times before to 1,000 tired travelers. The difference was his eyes. They didn't look at my money or the ledger or the key he slid across the gap. They stayed locked on mine, glassy and unblinking until I finally turned away. Room 14. The number was etched into a tarnished brass plate, the kind that felt heavy even when you tried not to think about it. Inside, the room smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, almost metallic like fruit rotting in a closed drawer. The carpet was mottled with burns, the curtains dotted with tiny cigarette holes. A crooked painting of a desert sunset hung over the bed, its horizon slanting the wrong way, as if the artist had forgotten which direction the sun was supposed to fall. The bathroom sink dripped steadily into a cracked basin, each drop echoing louder than it should have. I checked the locks. The chain was broken. Perfect, I muttered. Megan laughed, raising her camera. At least it's authentic. Her flash snapped across the walls, and for a second, the peeling wallpaper seemed to breathe. I didn't laugh. The air in that room felt crowded, like someone else had been there only minutes before. The curtains swayed slightly, though the window was shut. I told myself it was exhaustion, nothing more. But exhaustion doesn't make the walls seem thinner or the silence thicker. That night I couldn't sleep. Megan dozed off with her Discman glowing blue on the nightstand, the headphones clamped to her ears. I lay awake, staring at the crooked painting, every sound pressing against me. The faint squeak of footsteps pacing overhead, the thin, muffled cry of a baby down the hall. A low thud against the wall, like furniture being dragged. At 11:30 the doorknob rattled, a metallic clink, deliberate, testing. My breath froze. Megan's eyes snapped open. "Did you hear?" "Don't move," I whispered. The knob rattled again, harder. Then stillness, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Probably drunk. "Wrong room," Megan whispered, but her voice trembled. I wanted to believe her. But the rattle hadn't been hesitant. It had been practiced, like someone making sure. Around midnight, Megan stirred again. "I'm starving." I saw a vending machine in the lobby. "Are you serious? After what just happened?" She grinned, reckless as always. 2 minutes. I'll be back." I pressed my forehead against the window glass after she left, chewing my nail until it bled. That's when I saw it. The black pickup truck circling the lot. Once, twice, then stopping under the same broken lamp. 2 men inside. Their faces shadowed, turned toward the second-floor rooms like they were counting doors. When Megan returned, she was pale. The clerk was on the phone. He stopped when I walked in, just stared at me, like he knew. At 1:15, the knocking started. Soft at first, then a man's voice. "Room service, complimentary drinks." We hadn't ordered anything. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, until the wood shuddered in its frame. Then silence. The payphone outside our door rang. Its shrill cry sliced through the corridor, echoing far too long, like the sound had nowhere else to go. My chest clenched. Megan clutched her camera like it could shield her. "We have to do something," she whispered. "What? Open the door?" Her lips pressed tight. I dragged the dresser against the door. My arms shook, but adrenaline made me strong. We sat on the bed, backs to the headboard, whispering plans that sounded like jokes. "I'll throw the lamp," Megan said. "I'll grab the chair." We laughed, hollow, desperate. Not humor, just the thin noise you make when fear has nowhere left to go. The hours dragged like years. At dawn, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights splashed against the walls. I rushed to the window. Police cruisers swarmed the lot. Officers dragged 2 men from the black pickup, shoving them face first against the hood. But my relief shattered when the clerk was let out too, his hands bound. His wet eyes darted straight up at our window, like he knew we'd been watching all along. The officer who checked us out told us everything. The motel had been under surveillance. The clerk lured travelers, held them until the pickup arrived. "You were lucky," he said, sliding my ID back across the desk. "If you'd opened that door, it might have gone differently." His words should have comforted me. Instead, they cracked something open. Because in my gut, I knew the truth. Those men outside hadn't been the only ones waiting. There had been something else in that motel. Something older. Something that listened when silence fell. Megan deleted her photos as we drove east. The camera strap wound so tight around her wrist it left marks. "Some places aren't meant to be remembered," she whispered. "But I remember. I remember the painting slanting the wrong way. The payphone that screamed when no one touched it. The baby's cry in the hall, though there were no families checked in. I remember the way the air thickened in that room, like we were breathing someone else's breath. And I remember the eyes of the clerk, wet and unblinking, staring as though he wasn't just part of it. He was serving something. That night in Winslow didn't end with police cars and arrests. Not for me. It never ended. Because sometimes I wake in my apartment to the sound of a phone ringing in the dark. Sometimes I dream of a black pickup circling the block outside my window. Sometimes I hear the thin cry of a baby in the walls. I tell myself I survived because I listened to instinct, because I didn't open the door. But when I close my eyes, I see those wet eyes watching me, waiting. And the real question that keeps me awake is this: what if surviving was exactly what it wanted all along? I used to think exhaustion was just the price of ambition, a kind of tax you paid for wanting more out of life. Everyone said it would be worth it in the end, the late nights, the flights, the hotels, the meetings. That if I pushed through the grind now, I'd build a career solid enough to let me breathe later. But that was a lie. Exhaustion doesn't just make you tired, it loosens the seams of your life, lets things slip through, things you can't always explain away. I was 28 the year I thought I had everything figured out. A shiny new title on my business card, junior sales manager, better pay, the first real acknowledgement that I was climbing instead of treading water. My parents were proud. My friends teased me about joining the rat race, and my boyfriend tried to act supportive even though I could hear the strain in his voice every time I missed another weekend at home. I told him, and everyone else, the same story. It was temporary. Just one more year of travel, then I'd lock down a desk job in Denver, put down roots, and maybe finally plan a future instead of living out of a suitcase. But the truth? I was bone tired. Months of motel rooms that smelled like bleach and cigarettes. Dinners out of styrofoam containers. Calls home that grew shorter, sharper. It felt like every mile I drove pulled me farther from the person I thought I was supposed to be. It was late October, a Thursday, when I pulled off Highway 64 into a place called the Red Pine Motel. I hadn't chosen it. It was farther out than I wanted, but my booking app nudged it to the top of the list, insisting it was closest. 10 minutes away, it said. Turned out to be nearly 40. By the time the neon sign glowed through the trees, my eyes were raw from the drive, my back knotted, my stomach rolling from gas station coffee. The sign flickered red against the dark pines, and the lot stretched out empty except for a handful of scattered cars. The office light glowed yellow through bent blinds, buzzing faintly. I told myself it was fine. A bed was a bed. Inside, the man at the desk introduced himself as Jerry. Thin, mid-40s maybe, with a smile that looked too practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. He asked me where I was headed, if I traveled alone, if I had a big day tomorrow. Harmless questions, except his eyes didn't leave mine. He held them too long, too steady, as if memorizing my answers. He slid a brass key toward me. Room 12. The room smelled faintly of mildew. The carpet was stained, the furniture mismatched, the lamp flickered once before steadying. Still, I'd stayed in worse. I stretched out on the bed, telling myself I'd get 6 solid hours before another long day. But the room didn't settle. It creaked, not the random pops of old plumbing or wind against siding. These were deliberate, measured, weight-shifting creaks that seemed to come from the ceiling. Except the red pine was single-story, no upstairs. I lay awake, staring at the plaster, and the moment I sat up, the sound stopped. The next day blurred into handshakes and artificial smiles. But when I came back to room 12, I knew before I touched the door that something was wrong. The lock turned too easily. Inside, nothing looked broken, nothing missing. But the details had shifted. The remote moved from the nightstand to the desk. A drawer cracked open that I knew I'd left shut. The kind of wrong that doesn't scream but whispers. I muttered housekeeping, maybe, though I hadn't asked for service. I stormed back to the office. The light still glowed yellow, but Jerry's chair sat empty. A coffee cup, half empty, rested by the register. No steam. I called his name, Waited. Nothing. Back in my room, I shoved a chair under the doorknob, my fortress against whatever shadow I was building in my head. That night, the noises came back stronger. Footsteps, a dragging sound, cabinet doors slamming. I grabbed the room phone, pressed 0, deadline, not even static. I sat in silence, staring at the wall where the couch pressed too tight. Something about it was wrong, the paint slightly off, a patch too smooth. My pulse thudded as I pushed the couch aside. Dust rose, and behind it, a small hatch door, painted the same pale green as the wall. My breath caught. I crouched, tugged the handle. Locked. Relief. Then click. From the inside. I stumbled back, crashing into the couch. The hatch shifted open an inch. Air slipped out, cold, damp, metallic. And something else, faint, sweet, like crushed flowers left too long in a vase. The combination hit me so sharply I gagged. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. And then the sound. Breathing. Slow, steady, but layered, like panting, catching, the rhythm of someone running, then stopping, sucking air in gulps. My scalp prickled. The sound wasn't just breath, it was effort. Strain, like the thing down there was on a treadmill, trapped in some endless race. The realization twisted in me. It sounded like me. My own exhaustion, mirrored back from the dark. The breathing shifted closer, like a footfall on unseen stairs. My body finally obeyed the screaming in my head. I snatched my keys, bolted through the door, and ran. The car roared to life. Gravel sprayed. I didn't stop until 20 miles later under the buzzing lights of a diner. Inside, people laughed, forks clinked plates, a waitress poured coffee. The world was real again. But I couldn't shake it. Every sound echoed the running breath, the sickly sweet metallic air. I sat at the counter, pale and trembling, and caught sight of my reflection in the window. My face looked hollow, eyes wide, like I hadn't escaped at all. The next morning, I called the motel to cancel. The line rang, then hissed into static. I opened the booking app. The red pine was gone. No record, no listing, but I couldn't leave it. A week later, on my way back to Denver, I drove past. The neon still buzzed. Cars dotted the lot. The office glowed yellow. I parked across the street, waited. 10 minutes. No one went in or out. Inside, the desk sat as before. Empty chair. The same coffee cup, same level, as though frozen in time. And then I saw him. Jerry. Standing in the doorway to a back hall, his smile softer now, not painted. Almost relieved. He looked at me for a long time, like he'd expected me. "I'm glad you got out," he said. The words landed like ice. My mouth opened, but nothing came. He gave me that same too long stare, only now it wasn't predatory. It was weary, almost grateful. Then he turned and stepped back into the dark hall. I left before I could stop myself. On the drive home, the world tilted. Green paint, that same pale green, cropped up everywhere. On fences, in waiting rooms, on storefronts I swore I'd never noticed. At the diner where I stopped for coffee, the trim around the windows had been painted that shade. I asked the waitress how long it had been like that. She frowned, said it had always been. The scent followed too. That faint, floral metallic mix. In elevators. In my own apartment sometimes when I woke in the dark. I started dreaming of the hatch, waking with the sound of running breath filling my room, like something had followed me out. Like maybe when Jerry smiled, relieved, it wasn't because I'd escaped, but because whatever was down there finally had. I never went back. But I still see it sometimes, on the edges of highways, a glowing sign through the trees, buzzing red, pointing to the Red Pine Motel. Other drivers never seem to notice. When I ask if they saw the sign, they look at me blankly, and the truth I can't shake is this. I thought the Red Pine was a place. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's a door, one you only see when you're tired enough, desperate enough, worn thin enough to hear your own life chasing you down a set of hidden stairs. I trusted my instincts once and it saved me, but instincts don't protect you from what follows. Some doors, once they open, never really close. And sometimes the thing waiting in the dark isn't a stranger at all. It's you. Silence isn't supposed to breathe back at you. That's the thought I couldn't shake the night everything went wrong. The night that burrowed under my skin and has never left, reminding me that even ordinary places can turn into traps when you're too tired to see clearly. My name is Jordan Hall and I was 29 the year it happened. I worked as a freelance field technician for small telecom networks. Thankless jobs, endless highways, the constant ache of solitude. By then I'd stopped counting the number of nameless motels I'd slept in, or the amount of bad diner coffee that passed for dinner. It wasn't just fatigue that gnawed at me. It was something deeper, a hollowness from living in transit too long. That night I was driving south for a repair in Brine Haven, a coastal town 4.5 hours away. The job wasn't complicated, just tedious. I didn't want to wake at dawn and drag myself through weekday traffic. So after finishing a long Monday shift, I tossed together an overnight bag, shoved it into the trunk, and hit the road at dusk. Exhaustion hung heavy in me. My eyelids felt like they were lined with sandpaper. My bones hummed with a hollow ache that made the steering wheel vibrate strangely in my hands. Even the glow of oncoming headlights seemed too sharp, slicing through my temples. I found a listing on a site I sometimes used. A man named Mark R. had posted a private guest house in Darrow Ridge, Delaware, just off Route 9. $50, a lockbox key. Photos showed a faded recliner, beige carpet, curtains gone yellow with age. Not inviting, but not threatening either. I messaged him. His replies came back disjointed, clipped, almost artificial. Yes, you can stay. Minutes later, doorbox number, you get in fine, my dad left. No punctuation. No rhythm. Something about it left my stomach unsettled, like I was talking to a machine learning how to imitate people. Still, I was too drained to argue with convenience. By 11:15 p.m., the GPS led me into the woods. The farther I went, the thinner the road became until the trees leaned close on both sides, branches scraping faintly against the roof. I had the radio on low for comfort, but just as I neared the pin, it fizzled. A voice broke through the static, a fractured whisper, too faint to parse before it cut back to silence. I froze, hand on the knob, but the road was already curving into a cul-de-sac. The community was unsettling. 20 houses, maybe more, each one dark and still. No porch lights, no cars. It felt staged, like a neighborhood photographed at midnight and never lived in again. Number 14 sat at the far end. Gray siding strangled in ivy, a heavy wooden door swollen with age. My headlights swept across its windows, black, unblinking. I killed the engine and the silence was instantaneous, thick. I sat for a moment with my hands clamped on the wheel. For a second the thought rose sharp in my chest. Don't. But then I was out of the car, duffel over my shoulder, feet crunching on gravel. The keypad was mounted beside the door, metal slick with condensation. I entered the code. Click. The lock's sound tore through the cul-de-sac like a gunshot. It didn't just open, it echoed, vibrating out into the trees and back again. I froze, heart leaping, listening for movement. Nothing. I pushed inside. The air was wrong. Thick, damp, heavy on my skin. The smell hit me first. Wet soil, rot masked by something floral, like wilted orchids fermenting in water. It wasn't the musk of an old house. It was greenhouse air, dense enough to breathe in chunks. And the plants? Too many plants. Vines crawling across counters, potted palms crowding corners, orchids with petals like withered tongues. Leaves slick with condensation brushed against my arm as I passed. What the hell is this? A greenhouse? I muttered just to anchor myself in sound. The living room sagged under mismatched furniture. A square TV sat in the corner, unplugged, no remote, not functional, just there. I walked the hall, forcing myself to check the rooms. The first bedroom, a bare twin mattress on the floor, 3 porcelain dolls propped on the sill, their painted eyes milky and unfocused. For a flicker of a second, I thought one had shifted, just the smallest tilt of its head as the hallway light hit. My breath caught. I blinked hard, shut the door fast. The second bedroom, nutcrackers, floor to ceiling, lined shoulder to shoulder, some pristine, others scarred with chipped paint or missing jaws. Their teeth gleamed faintly in the dark. I swear one's arm twitched when I stepped inside, the faintest creak of wood. I snapped the light switch. Nothing. The room swallowed it. "Forget it," I whispered. "I'll take the couch. But first, food." I found a grocery, evergreen market, open 24 hours, fluorescent aisles, frozen pizza rolls, a bottle of peach tea. Standing at the register, I had the sudden urge to check my GoPro. It was a habit from an old break-in years before. Set it up in rentals to watch while I was gone. That night, I'd left it running on the TV stand. Back at the house, nothing had moved. Couch, bag, plants, all the same. Still, unease clung. I loaded the footage onto my laptop, fast-forwarded through silence. But the longer I watched, the more my stomach twisted. There was nothing to see, but my brain hissed, "Look closer, look." It was nearly 1 a.m. when I tried to sleep. I left the lights on. The dark felt like it wanted something from me. My phone, dead of service, charged uselessly in the kitchen. The outlet near the couch was dead. Every time I closed my eyes, the hallway breathed. Boards creaked, not in random settling, but in careful shifts, like weight shifting from foot to foot. Eventually, I got up. The bathroom glowed jaundiced yellow, tiles cracked, a half-used bar of soap melted into its dish. I sat there reading the back of a shampoo bottle, pretending normalcy. Then it came. Screech. The sound clawed across the silence, a chair dragging on wood. Slow, heavy, exact. My stomach turned to stone. That was the kitchen chair. Screech. Again, slower, like something savoring the motion. Then tap, 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 fingertips drumming. At first slow, patient, then quicker. Tap, 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 rising, moving. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like someone was calling me out. My skin prickled as the rhythm climbed, then changed. The taps crawled, moving from the floor up the table leg, until they landed sharp on the tabletop itself, right where I knew the lockbox key had once sat. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The sound stopped. Silence swelled so large it hurt. I whispered, barely audible. "What the fuck did I just hear?" I forced myself out. My body shook as I bolted across the living room, knife pulled from my bag. I turned toward the kitchen, and for a heartbeat I saw it. A shadow slid across the wall, vanishing as fast as I registered it. The chair cushion dipped, the faintest indent, as if something had just lifted off it. Then, nothing. The chair tucked neatly in, aligned perfectly. The plants loomed, leaves trembling though no air stirred. My eyes stung from the thickness in the room, the taste of soil sour on my tongue. I backed away, grabbed my bag. I didn't check the bedrooms. I didn't shut the door. I just ran. The drive was agony. Every mile it felt like something pressed against the back seat, breathing down my neck. I glanced into the mirror again and again, convinced the dolls or nutcrackers had followed me, that the shadow would be there. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was crowded. By the time I reached a Holiday Inn in Dunley, it was nearly 3 a.m. The clerk looked up, startled. "You good, ma'am?" "I just need a room," I rasped. My voice didn't sound like mine. He handed me a key to a suite not yet cleaned. I thanked him too many times, too quickly. The bed was made. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knife clutched under the sheet. The silence in the room felt just as sharp as the silence in the car. I waited for the tapping, for the screech, for something to claim me, but nothing came. I still have the GoPro footage. Nothing moves, no sound, no shadow, just me, sitting there, staring into empty space. And I wonder, even now, was it just a house? Or was it a mouth? And had it wanted me to stay, or only to pass through? Funny thing about memory, how it stretches, distorts, hides things under layers until you can't tell what's real and what you made up just to sleep easier. I don't talk much about that spring break in North Carolina, not because I've forgotten, but because I remember it too well. Some memories don't fade. They fester. They whisper. They wait. I hadn't seen my dad in 2 years when I got his email. It came out of nowhere. No subject line, just a few lines about how he'd been thinking about me, how he'd gotten a place outside Asheville, and how he wanted to spend a few days together over break. Said he missed me. Said he was ready to start healing. As if absence could be fixed like a broken lamp. As if healing was a switch he could suddenly flip. He didn't leave us in some dramatic explosion. No slammed doors or police calls. Just a voicemail one day when I was 15. He said he couldn't do it anymore, that he needed to get his head straight, that was it. My mom and I never really talked about it. She poured more wine than she used to, stayed out later, and never said his name. I stopped asking questions, stopped believing anything anyone told me. By 17, I was quiet. Not shy, just worn down. I lived in the school's art room, sketching things that felt impossible. I liked charcoal. It was messy, honest. You couldn't fake clean lines with charcoal. Everything smudged, left behind a trace. So when he emailed, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part of me, smaller, needier, read it 5 times before replying. I didn't ask my mom. She'd have said no anyway. I waited until her Friday shift started, packed a duffel, and met him outside my school. He was parked near the gym in his old Subaru. The same dent in the side, same rust on the wheel well. Stone Temple Pilots crackled through the busted speakers. He looked different, older, a little softer around the eyes, a little more worn. But he smiled like no time had passed, like I'd run to him. I didn't. We didn't say much on the drive. Miles of trees and awkward silence. We passed a closed gas station, a field of rusted tractors, a billboard for a church that promised forgiveness. I kept thinking about how weird it was. How you could ride next to someone who made you, who raised you, and feel like you were with a stranger. The place he booked was called Shady Pines Motel. 20 minutes from Asheville, nestled in a stretch of forest that looked beautiful in a way that felt suspicious. Too quiet. The front office had a carved wooden bear holding a welcome sign. Our room was 108, second from the end. Outside, pine needles carpeted the parking lot. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and maybe lavender, or something trying to be. Across from us was room 109. There was a gray Buick parked crooked outside it. I wouldn't have thought anything of it except for the woman in the window. Blonde, maybe late 40s. She wasn't doing anything, just watching us. Eyes like still water. No smile, no reaction, just there. The room inside was nothing special. Beige everything. A tiny TV with a remote taped together. Dad put on some sports channel like he always used to. Tried to talk about his new job doing landscaping, said being outside helped him think. Said he missed my drawings. I didn't say much. Ate 2 slices of greasy pizza and stared at the window. Around 10, he stepped out for a smoke. I watched from inside. That's when I saw her again. The woman from 109. She was standing barefoot outside her door. Her robe was long, touching the concrete. She didn't have a phone or a drink or anything. She just stood there, staring at him. He stared back. Then he crushed the cigarette under his heel and came back in without a word. "You know her?" I asked. He grabbed a plastic cup and filled it with tap water. "She's probably just lonely." Something about how he said it made me feel cold, like the words didn't come naturally, like he was covering something up. The next morning I woke up to a note under the door. "You're not as safe here as he wants you to think." I stared at it for a long time before showing him. He read it once and crumpled it up like it didn't matter. "Probably some nut," he said. "Ignore it. People do weird things." "But how would anyone—" "Drop it," he said, sharper now. I didn't push. But that was the moment I started watching him differently. That afternoon, I saw them near the vending machines. Her robe was gone. She wore jeans, a loose sweater, but it was her. She was talking to him. No, not talking. Confronting him. He looked like someone caught, like whatever game he'd been playing was finally up. That night I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the note, about her eyes. Sometime after midnight I heard tapping, 3 soft taps on the window, deliberate, rhythmic. I held still. My heart raced. Then a voice, soft, almost kind. He did it before. Don't let him do it again. I bolted upright, yanked the curtain open. No one. But when I opened the door, cold air rushed in. Pine needles littered the concrete like they'd just been swept aside. Her door, room 109, was open just a crack, a sliver of yellow light spilling into the dark. I slammed the door, locked it, and waited for sunrise. At breakfast, I told him everything. The tap, the whisper, the open door. He dropped his mug. Ceramic shattered across the floor. He didn't say a word. Just started packing. We were on the road in 10 minutes. For an hour, he didn't speak. Just gripped the wheel like it was holding him together. Finally, I asked, "Why is she warning me?" His knuckles whitened. "She thinks she knows the story." "What story?" "I told her things," he said, voice low. "Stuff I never told you. Stuff I didn't want to believe myself." "Like what?" "She lost her son," he said. "Stayed in that motel. Said he stopped, swallowed. Said he took his life. We talked a lot. I was staying there back when I left, before I came home." "You knew her?" "I didn't mean to, but I talked. I vented. Said things about your mom, about you." "What things?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the road. "She thinks I hurt you," he said, "that I was dangerous." "Were you?" "No." He looked at me then. "No matter what she thought, I never did. I was lost. I didn't know how to be a dad anymore, but I didn't hurt you." "But she said she thought she was helping." We got home by noon. He waited in the car while I grabbed my stuff. When I came back out, he rolled down the window. "I know I screwed up," he said, "but I didn't lie just to lie. I thought I was doing what was right. I thought disappearing would hurt less than staying broken." I nodded, but something in me didn't fully believe him. Some part that remembered how he looked when he saw her, like he'd been caught by a ghost. We didn't talk much after that. A few texts here and there, but that week stayed silent. Even now, years later, I still check the room next door when I'm staying at a motel. I can't help it. Because danger doesn't always knock loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it tries to protect you in the only way it knows how. By telling a truth you don't want to hear. So let me ask you something. When someone warns you in the dead of night, do you listen? Or do you wait until it's too late to wonder if they were right all along? Silence isn't supposed to breathe back at you. That's the thought I couldn't shake the night everything went wrong. The night that burrowed under my skin and has never left, reminding me that even ordinary places can turn into traps when you're too tired to see clearly. My name is Jordan Hall, and I was 29 the year it happened. I worked as a freelance field technician for small telecom networks. Thankless jobs, endless highways, the constant ache of solitude. By then I'd stopped counting the number of nameless motels I'd slept in, or the amount of bad diner coffee that passed for dinner. It wasn't just fatigue that gnawed at me. It was something deeper, a hollowness from living in transit too long. That night I was driving south for a repair in Brine Haven, a coastal town 4.5 hours away. The job wasn't complicated, just tedious. I didn't want to wake at dawn and drag myself through weekday traffic, so after finishing a long Monday shift, I tossed together an overnight bag, shoved it into the trunk, and hit the road at dusk. Exhaustion hung heavy in me. My eyelids felt like they were lined with sandpaper. My bones hummed with a hollow ache that made the steering wheel vibrate strangely in my hands. Even the glow of oncoming headlights seemed too sharp, slicing through my temples. I found a listing on a site I sometimes used. A man named Mark R. had posted a private guest house in Darrow Ridge, Delaware, just off Route 9. $50, a lockbox key. Photos showed a faded recliner, beige carpet, curtains gone yellow with age. Not inviting, but not threatening either. I messaged him. His replies came back disjointed, clipped, almost artificial. Yes, you can stay. Minutes later. Doorbox number you get in fine, my dad left. No punctuation, no rhythm. Something about it left my stomach unsettled, like I was talking to a machine learning how to imitate people. Still, I was too drained to argue with convenience. By 11:15 p.m., the GPS led me into the woods. The farther I went, the thinner the road became until the trees leaned close on both sides, branches scraping faintly against the roof. I had the radio on low for comfort, but just as I neared the pin, it fizzled. A voice broke through the static, a fractured whisper, too faint to parse before it cut back to silence. I froze, hand on the knob, but the road was already curving into a cul-de-sac. The community was unsettling. 20 houses, maybe more, each one dark and still. No porch lights, no cars. It felt staged, like a neighborhood photographed at midnight and never lived in again. Number 14 sat at the far end. Gray siding strangled in ivy, a heavy wooden door swollen with age. My headlights swept across its windows. Black, unblinking. I killed the engine and the silence was instantaneous, thick. I sat for a moment with my hands clamped on the wheel. For a second, the thought rose sharp in my chest. Don't. But then I was out of the car, duffel over my shoulder, feet crunching on gravel. The keypad was mounted beside the door, metal slick with condensation. I entered the code. Click. The lock's sound tore through the cul-de-sac like a gunshot. It didn't just open, it echoed, vibrating out into the trees and back again. I froze, heart leaping, listening for movement. Nothing. I pushed inside. The air was wrong. Thick, damp, heavy on my skin. The smell hit me first. Wet soil, rot masked by something floral, like wilted orchids fermenting in water. It wasn't the musk of an old house. It was greenhouse air, dense enough to breathe in chunks. And the plants. Too many plants. Vines crawling across counters, potted palms crowding corners, orchids with petals like withered tongues. Leaves, slick with condensation, brushed against my arm as I passed. What the hell is this, a greenhouse? I muttered, just to anchor myself in sound. The living room sagged under mismatched furniture. A square TV sat in the corner, unplugged, no remote. Not functional, just there. I walked the hall, forcing myself to check the rooms. The first bedroom, a bare twin mattress on the floor. 3 porcelain dolls propped on the sill, their painted eyes milky and unfocused. For a flicker of a second, I thought one had shifted, just the smallest tilt of its head as the hallway light hit. My breath caught. I blinked hard, shut the door fast. The second bedroom, nutcrackers, floor to ceiling, lined shoulder to shoulder, some pristine, others scarred with chipped paint or missing jaws. Their teeth gleamed faintly in the dark. I swear one's arm twitched when I stepped inside, the faintest creak of wood. I snapped the light switch. Nothing. The room swallowed it. Forget it, I whispered. I'll take the couch. But first, food. I found a grocery, Evergreen Market, open 24 hours. Fluorescent aisles, frozen pizza rolls, a bottle of peach tea. Standing at the register, I had the sudden urge to check my GoPro. It was a habit from an old break-in years before. Set it up in rentals to watch while I was gone. That night I'd left it running on the TV stand. Back at the house, nothing had moved. Couch, bag, plants, all the same. Still, unease clung. I loaded the footage onto my laptop, fast-forwarded through silence. But the longer I watched, the more my stomach twisted. There was nothing to see, but my brain hissed, "Look closer. Look." It was nearly 1 a.m. when I tried to sleep. I left the lights on. The dark felt like it wanted something from me. My phone, dead of service, charged uselessly in the kitchen. The outlet near the couch was dead. Every time I closed my eyes, the hallway breathed. Boards creaked, not in random settling but in careful shifts, like weight shifting from foot to foot. Eventually, I got up. The bathroom glowed jaundiced yellow, tiles cracked, a half-used bar of soap melted into its dish. I sat there reading the back of a shampoo bottle, pretending normalcy. Then it came. Screech. The sound clawed across the silence. A chair dragging on wood. Slow. Heavy. Exact. My stomach turned to stone. That was the kitchen chair. Screech. Again. Slower, like something savoring the motion. Then tap, 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 fingertips drumming. At first, slow, patient, then quicker, tap, 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 rising, moving. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, like someone was calling me out. My skin prickled as the rhythm climbed, then changed. The taps crawled, moving from the floor up the table leg until they landed sharp on the tabletop itself, right where I knew the lockbox key had once sat. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The sound stopped. Silence swelled so large it hurt. I whispered, barely audible, "What the fuck did I just hear?" I forced myself out. My body shook as I bolted across the living room, knife pulled from my bag. I turned toward the kitchen, and for a heartbeat I saw it. A shadow slid across the wall, vanishing as fast as I registered it. The chair cushion dipped, the faintest indent, as if something had just lifted off it. Then, nothing. The chair tucked neatly in, aligned perfectly. The plants loomed, leaves trembling though no air stirred. My eyes stung from the thickness in the room, the taste of soil sour on my tongue. I backed away, grabbed my bag. I didn't check the bedrooms. I didn't shut the door. I just ran. The drive was agony. Every mile, it felt like something pressed against the back seat, breathing down my neck. I glanced into the mirror again and again, convinced the dolls or nutcrackers had followed me, that the shadow would be there. The silence in the car wasn't empty, it was crowded. By the time I reached a Holiday Inn in Dunley, it was nearly 3 a.m. The clerk looked up, startled. "You good, ma'am?" "I just need a room," I rasped. My voice didn't sound like mine. He handed me a key to a suite not yet cleaned. I thanked him too many times, too quickly. The bed was made. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knife clutched under the sheet. The silence in the room felt just as sharp as the silence in the car. I waited for the tapping, for the screech, for something to claim me. But nothing came. I still have the GoPro footage. Nothing moves. No sound. No shadow. Just me, sitting there, staring into empty space. And I wonder, even now, was it just a house? Or was it a mouth? And had it wanted me to stay? Or only to pass through?